have direct integrations with all our work providers, be it Deliveroo, Uber Eats, Uber, Just Eat. As their drivers work, we know about it instantaneously, and then we can charge them because the work providers are sending us their shifts and sending us their work data.
Today I'm joined by Natalie Loh, who's a senior product manager at Zego. Zego is an insurtech that offers flexible vehicle insurance for couriers, food delivery drivers, and the self-employed, etc. On today's show, we'll take a look at what Zego's partnership with Uber looks like and talk about what companies like Zego can do for the gig economy workers. It's becoming such a big part of the ecosystem. Thank you very much for coming on today. How are you doing?
Good, thanks for having me.
Great. So we'll just start off with some general questions about sort of the way that the company operates, you personally, and then go into a little bit more detail about how the functionality of the product works.
Perfect.
Cool. So just to begin with, can you tell us a little bit about you and what Zego does?
Yeah, of course. Thanks for having me on the show. I'm Natalie. I'm Senior Product Manager at Zego. I look after the B2C side of things where we're looking at new problems insurance can solve for all sorts of drivers, from delivery to courier to ride hailing. And what Zego does is Zego makes smart and simple insurance that is priced by the minute or by the mile for people to work the way they want to work.
Great. What was your trajectory and how do you go into sort of being a product person?
So I actually started as a software engineer.
Okay.
So I was kind of a self-taught programmer before I moved into product with a slight stint in UI UX. So I've done a bit of a lot of things before finally falling into product properly.
How did you find that transition going from being a sort of more sort of technical boots on the ground sort of person to being more of a maybe organizational or structurally significant piece there?
Yeah, I do really like being hands-on, I think, which is what explains my track record of kind of working in startups. I think as a person, I quite enjoy wearing multiple hats and having that variety day to day. So I think product lends very well to that. I do miss coding, but I think the technical background has definitely helped a lot.
Yeah. Seems to be that people come from maybe 3 different backgrounds a lot of the time, I find, when we speak to product people, either technical, design, or business, and finding yourself able to sort of marry those 3 together in a way is the real key strength, I think.
Yeah.
What does Zego do more specifically? What are the sort of marquee features that you want to offer through the platform?
Right, so an example I kind of like to give is with our flagship product. So imagine you are a delivery driver, whether you're working for Deliveroo or Uber Eats. You know, maybe you're just working a couple hours a week, you're just trying it out, or it's just a summer job for you. You wouldn't be able to afford an upfront annual insurance policy, which is what most traditional insurers would offer. So Zego is kind of born out of that pain, and we offer pay-as-you-go by-the-hour insurance. So it allows for these gig economy workers or people who just don't suit a full-time insurance policy to really get their foot through the industry and get started, get working.
Cool. So how did this sort of like problem come about? How did they discover that this is what they wanted to do and build these products?
So I think 2 of our 3 co-founders were ex-Deliveroo, so they were really close to the problem.
Yeah.
One of them was kind of in charge of recruiting new drivers for Deliveroo at the time and found that it was really hard. The amount of people who signed up wanting to be Deliveroo drivers versus those who actually knew that they needed insurance, who could then afford to purchase that insurance with traditional companies, the dropout rate was really high.
Wow.
So Zego is really born out of that problem.
So you became the first UK insurtech to get your own sort of insurance license. Can you talk a little bit about what this is and what it means?
Yeah, so Zego's been going for about 3 years now.
Yeah.
We got our license like late last year, maybe October. That was super big for us. It was a huge push. It took like more than a year to get that in place. What it really means for us is that we can start innovating and taking on risk on our own books.
Okay.
Whereas previously, when we'd like to launch a new insurance product, we would have to go to other insurance companies and work with them. So the risk appetite would be very much what they were comfortable with.
Yeah.
And we believe that we understand our customers the best, that we understand this new market, be it the gig economy, be it new types of vehicles, that we're working with kick scooters, Dot in France, or even large fleets, or like peer-to-peer car sharing, Drover. We believe we understand these new business models better. So being able to have a full stack end-to-end control over our products, how we price, and how we innovate, I think that's where it's really exciting.
Yeah. There must have been some reticence or hesitation when going into having their own license, I guess, because when you provide the sort of system through which people can apply for insurance products from other companies, you're not really taking on any of the risk that's affiliated with that. The balance books are not necessarily yours to have to handle. Was there anything there that was were there any hesitations about the way that this sort of license would work, do you think?
For us?
Yeah.
I think that it was a no-brainer for us, I think, in terms of the type of products that we were hoping to get out there into the market, in terms of how fast we wanted to get these products to market. You just can't really beat having your own license and having that full control. I think also in the traditional insurance industry, you outsource a lot of different bits of the user journey to different companies, be it claims to a certain claims handler, be it the creation of the insurance policy to another insurer, where we really want to not only deliver the best user experience, but also just cut down on costs so that we can deliver cheaper products to users, is by completely owning the end-to-end.
Okay, cool. So this is clearly, you've mentioned a few times there, a play for the gig economy and understanding that there is going to be a different nature to the type of work that people are conducting in the future. How does a Zego employee or someone who owns the company, how would they describe the future of the gig economy? Where does this present opportunities for a company like you to sort of get in there?
Yeah, so the gig economy was where Zego was kind of born out of. As I said before, several of our co-founders were ex-Deliveroo employees. We kind of see Zego as enabling new business models and new ways of working, gig economy being just one of them. I think Zego offers smart and flexible insurance, flexibility really being key. Whether you work by the hour and like to be charged on a pay-as-you-go model, similar to like an Oyster card top-up model, or whether you are an owner of a large fleet and you only like your cars to be insured when they're on the road and not when they're in the garage. I think Zego really, by understanding risk at an individual level, better than anyone else on the market, we're able to price bespoke, whether it's to your specific scooter when you're delivering, or whether it's to your specific van as part of a larger fleet.
How does it work when a company like Deliveroo, say, come on board? Do you sort of have to shape the way that you operate around them, or do you kind of find them sort of accommodating to the ways that Zego is?
Yeah, I think we're very lucky in that we're first to market in this type of product. So no one else offers what Zego can offer, which is not only flexible insurance, but to be insured automatically with our integrations with our work providers as their drivers work. So breaking that down a little bit, we have direct integrations with all our work providers, be it Deliveroo, Uber Eats, Uber, Just Eat. What that means is as their drivers work, we know about it instantaneously, and then we can charge them because the work providers are sending us their shifts and sending us their work data.
Okay.
So this is kind of a very key in our relationship with them. No other insurer.
How do you get that information coming in then? That sounds quite unique to me.
Yeah. So way back when we first started, drivers were self-reporting their work hours. So before I jump on my bike, I'd be like start. When I'm done with the trip, I'll be stop.
Okay.
So that has lots of legal issues in terms of fraud, or in terms of you not being covered fully while you work. So having a direct integration of the work provider completely solves that, because they have full knowledge of when their trip starts, when their trip ends, their full location, kind of whereabouts. We integrate it with each work provider on like a case-by-case basis. And then, yeah, that's kind of how the partnership was born.
Okay, and that happens via an API, I would imagine.
Exactly.
Something.
They expose like their API to us, and this is not. I think this is something that they would have built specifically for Zego.
Okay, really neat. That's neat. Cool. So the first thing we're going to look at today is the actual opportunity to grab a quote. There's the one. So feel free to jump in and explain what's going on at any point here, but we've got this sort of go button takes us through to this sort of nicely signaled form, the option to sort of get our estimate, and then a bit of information as to when it's required. And then we've got this sort of link your account, which I guess you've just answered there, a little bit of information about sort of using third-party data via their API.
Yeah.
And then going into a form here, we're going to go through the manual sort of process, a little bit of Trustpilot stuff there at the bottom, and then some estimations taken from, I guess, the information we've already got, but then also to be developed over time as sort of your relationship with that user improves. Bit of information about the vehicle, nice little sort of visual cue there about the nature of the vehicle you're driving there. It's a GB little license plate, which is quite neat. And from there, we can sort of get some purchase information.
Yeah, so as you see, you already kind of have what we call an estimate upfront, just by putting in very basic details. The design decision went into there was how much details do we need so that the barrier of entry to getting an estimate is really low, but still sufficient enough that we can give users an accurate estimate. If you want to get like a full, complete quote, as you see, you actually have to give a lot of detail about you, about your car, about your driving history. But most people, through user research we've done, just speaking to users, when they're doing research online about which insurer they want to go with, or even how much insurance costs, they just really want to quickly know, ballpark, what's this going to cost me?
Yeah.
So we created this kind of quick estimate feature to kind of address that pain.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then further on down this, we've got sort of a bit more information and more of a calculation there rather than an estimation, I guess, pointing to what you said there. The language is slightly different, but two types of cover there, a fully comprehensive and a third party only. Two, I would imagine, quite different in terms of price, you can see. And then what's the difference between sort of the third party and fully comprehensive there?
So that's different levels of cover which the policy provides you.
Yep.
Fully comprehensive will kind of cover you through different types of accidents and claims, whereas third party only, well, it's slightly less coverage. So it depends on your personal preference. A lot of drivers who drive as their main job would go for fully comprehensive, just so that it gives them that full protection, really.
Cool. So the first question, kind of more specifically about the journey there, is we've mentioned the sort of API access. How do you sort of, we didn't look at the journey specifically, but we've got just a cursory question around that, is the sort of the designing around another service and the sort of the notion of designing for a facilitation with a different provider. How was that approached, and were there any requirements that were on sort of the provider's side that you had to bear in mind?
Yeah, so our strategy of integrating work providers was how Zego scaled very quickly in the beginning. Because let's say if you have an integration with Deliveroo, for example, you then have access to all of Deliveroo's drivers, which was a great way for us to tap into the market when we first started. In terms of the technical decisions around that, again, very lucky in that we were the only one who really does this in this space. Deliveroo really wanted the product to begin with, so it wasn't that hard to sell. I think they were very accommodating, and they've helped us a lot in terms of getting it set up. You do have to think about future-proofing the integrations just from kind of like a platform point of view. What I mean by that is the data you get from each work provider will be very different. but you still want to standardize that on your platform. So to have some kind of level of sanitation or a level of cleaning, so to speak, so that once the data does reach Zego, we can kind of manipulate and use that data in a kind of like in a coherent way.
Sure.
And not have to do it case by case for every single.
Yeah. It's interesting, I think, because you're a sort of essentially a financial services company, which will be regulated, as we seem guessed, by the FCA and with an insurance license. So you have a certain set of requirements that will come from that, I would imagine. And then you also have a set of requirements which come from being a partner of an e-commerce product and having their own sort of systems and things to sort of consider. Just a random side question, but have you ever found there to be sort of anything tricky in integrating with someone like Uber or Deliveroo, where the regulations might not match, or maybe the requirements might not match?
Yeah, so I can speak about our financial regulations and how that has impacted product design. I think you're right, we're very heavily regulated. There's a lot of things that we have to know up front when designing certain user flows, especially around data.
Yeah.
Not only like GDPR, but I think when it comes to financial data and PII, personally identifiable data, that's where things get a bit trickier. I think this is why when you go through a typical user journey purchasing an insurance policy with a typical insurer, it's long, it's lengthy, it's lots of detail, it's a lot of almost like red tape. So the real product technical and design challenge for Zego is how do we navigate all these restrictions, all these regulations, while still offering like a seamless, beautiful user experience.
Yeah.
And surfacing the right information at the right time. Things like, when people think of insurance, they think about like long pages of terms and conditions and policy documents. In the spirit of treating customers fairly, how do we condense that and make sure they know what they need to know, at the same time being able to move through that journey easily, if that makes sense.
Yeah, exactly. And we've seen over the past few years, for example, people maybe phasing the amount of information they gather. Like as you kind of rightly pointed out there at the beginning, you want to sort of gather and deliver a result quite quickly, an estimation or something like that. But then being able to like let the user know where they are on their journey and then sort of like say, oh, you've reached one point, now let's go to a next point, and then we're going to gather another bit of information there, and not just being like a big red icy wall of like red tape, as you quite nicely say. Then that must be a nice way of being able to facilitate that data gathering exercise. Another one which is also really interesting on this is that on this sort of like gathering exercises basis is we often find that people are looking more and more to sort of, especially the more dynamic companies, to companies like Deliveroo, Uber and that sort of thing for UX patterns, sort of like flows, that sort of thing. So being that close to the action must be helpful in that regard, because you can behave more like a traditional, really high-performing tech company rather than a bank in more ways than one. So you must see yourselves more as an e-commerce sort of like, or one of these sort of delivery driver services rather than an actual insurance service in the way that the product operates. Is that a fair assumption, do you think?
Yeah, I think definitely in the engineering and product team, we see ourselves as a tech company first and foremost, rather than an insurance company.
Absolutely.
And I think that the kind of state we live in at the moment in terms of what users are expecting of digital products is that the level of basic kind of UX is so high.
Yeah.
When you're exposed every day to apps, like as you said, Deliveroo, other Monzo, apps like that, users have a very high expectation of what is simply hygiene factors.
Exactly.
Whereas maybe 5-10 years ago, they would be more at the delighting user side of things. Now it's just a basic necessity.
So what sort of decisioning is actually happening at this point to create a policy? So what's going on in the background?
Yeah, so it's actually way more complicated than it might seem. So we price users individually based on a multitude of factors. And this is all stuff that I've only learned as I joined Zego, because
Okay.
I didn't come from an insurance background. So this is all really fascinating to me as well.
Yeah.
Things like how old your car is, how many years have you been driving, how many years have you been driving professionally,
Yeah.
how many hours are you planning to work? You know, the more you work, the more risky you are.
Yeah.
So all these factors we collect through the form. Sometimes we also, where possible, make use of third-party APIs like DVLA, My License, to get information automatically. If not, the process of you reporting all this information is really long. Also, sometimes we do ask you to provide the information, but then we corroborate it with third-party information just to make sure it's accurate and kind of reduce fraud and things like that.
Yeah.
So once we have all that information, using kind of our own models that our actuarial and data science team built, we are able to come out with a nice price at the end.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Big, nice, for sort of encouraging price there, as we can see from the fully comprehensive area. That's clearly something you're trying to push or get people, encourage users to use. What's the visual cues that you want to use there to get people into fully comprehensive? And is it the case that you want to get them using that?
Yeah, I think ultimately we want users to choose the right cover for them. And then you have to balance that with business goals as well.
Yeah.
Fully comprehensive is obviously more expensive, but it's also higher coverage. So I think at this point of the journey, it's about educating the driver, especially if you're a new driver, if you're new to this type of work, understanding what you actually need and what you can expect when you do, unfortunately meet an accident and then have to do a claim.
Sure.
I think it's very important to have that education piece up front to prevent any kind of dissatisfaction later down the line when you're like, oh, I thought I was covered for this.
Yeah.
Why can't I claim this? We want to make sure that you have as much information to make like an educated choice for yourself up front.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Also, most of our users are mobile, very much kind of mobile platform. I think more than like 70% of our users engage with Zego on a mobile platform.
Yeah. I guess if they're delivery drivers, then
exactly, they're always on their phones.
Yeah.
They have really strong communities. Like, I'm not sure if you've seen when you're in an Uber and they have like these WhatsApp groups with other Uber drivers.
Oh, did they really?
Yeah, so like those communities are huge. So they very much are native to their mobile phones, and they talk to their friends, they talk to other drivers through their mobile phones. So very often Zego is kind of introduced to people by word of mouth.
Yeah.
So be like, hey, check out this link. I just got insurance from these guys.
Cool.
And then they'll open up the link on their phone.
So we're
very much, into optimizing the mobile experience.
I think I need to start using more taxis. I did not know that was a thing. So the design language for the product itself, you said that you sort of operate more as a tech company, or try to anyway. This is a specific key functionality of that is that you need to have a really strong design language. And it's a really nicely designed product, really clean and well developed. But sort of how did the design language and sort of like the visual language that comes along with that?
Yeah, I think as with any startup at our stage, our brand, our design language, our design library, whatever you want to call it, has gone through many stages of iteration and evolution.
Yeah.
Whether it's how many times you've changed your main color.
Yeah.
I know you'll be able to see like tons of hex codes for like our green.
Preach.
Yeah, it's just everywhere.
We know about that.
Yeah, so I think we've been through that as well. And also we started off as a company very much known for our flagship product for the gig economy, which is like for delivery drivers. And as we expand into B2B, into fleets, into things like kick scooters or vans, our brand has had to evolve with that.
Okay.
So that's been really tricky, moving really quickly while still thinking about how to evolve that brand. We are currently have a really great design team who work on our pattern library and our design library, creating this is not news to anyone, but like reusable components.
Yeah.
Our team is scaling really, really quickly right now. So those building blocks have become really crucial. I think we tripled in the last year, and we're planning to double in 2020.
Nice.
So I think all those scalability kind of like Lego blocks, so to speak, are becoming really, really important for us now.
Yeah. Do you ever find yourself like lazily wandering over into Figma or Sketch to try and get involved again? It can be quite tempting, can't it, I guess?
I think so. I'm actually a Sketch user. So when I used to do UI UX design and when I used to do freelance, I did it completely in Sketch. I think like about 4 months ago, Zego made the transition from Sketch to Figma.
Yeah.
So I would say I'm not as comfortable in Figma, but I can see why we moved.
How do you know kind of what information you want to gather at one time? Like that's, I guess, a speech back to the sort of the data gathering exercise that we were talking about at the beginning. How much is enough information and when is it enough information?
Right. When it comes to information we need to collect to give you a full quote that you can actually purchase, that information is actually quite straightforward to us because we just need X amount of factors to put into our model for us to price you accurately. I think maybe what you're getting at, which is kind of more of the secret sauce bit, is when it comes to the quick estimates, which is like your first initial estimate, not the full quote. How much do you ask? The more you ask, the more accurate the estimate, but the more you ask, potentially the lower the conversion rate. As you add more fields into the form. I think that little widget with the quick estimates has gone through tons and tons of experimentation and A/B testing in terms of adding and removing fields, in terms of how that correlates to the accuracy of the estimate we can give. A big pain point for us is lots of times our customers love purchasing insurance over the phone. They really like that personal touch, talking to people, asking questions about their cover, especially if they're new to the industry. We found that when there's a huge disparity in the estimate and their final quote, people, rightly so, are quite upset. More often than not, the final quote's higher rather than lower, because when we make assumptions about your initial estimate,
you always miss stuff, don't you?
Yeah, exactly. So it's a really, really hard business and design problem.
Sure. Cool. Let's have a look at the second journey, which is the final part of that section. So we are looking at the sort of terms bit now. In here, quite clearly presented and nicely laid out sort of list of terms, and then a big button at the bottom encouraging you to agree. A big sort of flash there, some information about sort of renewing the policy, and then we move down to the bottom of this legal doc, and we've got a nice cue there to say make sure you read it, folks, because hate to say I told you so. And then in here with the card details to actually complete the payment. 3 providers there: MasterCard, Visa, Amex, and then we've got a little checkbox to move through. Again, like we're talking then about like making progress, and we're saying you've done a good job, but here's the next bit. How important is that sort of as a tool for getting people to keep going, if you will?
I think the thing about this particular flow is that legally we need a lot of be it documentation or information before we can legally sell you the insurance policy. We've done a lot of thinking around, should we get everything up front and then let you purchase at the end and then you're all set up? Or should we get the minimum amount required, have you purchase, and in that sense lock that customer in, and then all the documents come after? I think we are now gravitating towards the latter, where if the documentation, we do need it before your policy starts, but if we can get it on your kind of at the customer's convenience later on, we will push that. So just imagine you are kind of looking for delivery insurance, you're on your phone, you're answering all these questions, and then they're asking you for your no claims discount documentation, which maybe you need to speak to your previous insurer, maybe you need to dig it out, take a photo of it. Well,
I always personally carry it around with me, but I know some people might not.
For those people who don't, we give them the option to come back later and then upload it. I think that unfortunately with this type of product, you do need to give a lot of documentation, whether it's like your driver's license, your taxi badge, et cetera, et cetera. So trying to make this as convenient as possible. We send a link to the users afterwards, so we like continue your journey at your convenience at home. A lot of them are actually, surprisingly, on the road while purchasing insurance, which I don't know how safe that is.
That's worrying.
Yeah.
We saw a little bit of detail there about sort of, we can call them La Parisienne assurances. This is one, I guess, one of the providers. Are you working with sort of one provider there, or are there a batch of them? How does that look, and does that give you different sort of ways of delivering different types of policy to the user?
Yeah. So we work with tons of other insurers.
Oh, right.
La Parisienne in specifically, they gave us like a great kind of launch pad to kind of bring all these innovative products to market.
Oh, okay. Were they one of the first ones that you were involved with then?
I think so, yeah, I believe so. We were involved with quite a few in the beginning because I think different insurers will have different risk appetites, and they will have different specializations. So we might go to one for delivery, we might go to others for fleets, for example.
Okay.
And I think that they have gotten Zego to where we are today in terms of when we enter a new market. As an insurtech company, I think one of our strengths, but also potentially challenges in the beginning, is that we hire a lot of tech people and a lot of people who are traditionally not from the insurance space. Mm-hmm. And working with other insurers like La Parisienne allows us to enter a market with their expertise.
Yeah.
And then kind of off the back of that learning, hopefully we're now taking that into our own books, our own insurance license.
Yeah, I read something the other day, I think it's still here actually, which was around sort of the changing role in developing situation, the sort of like the unbundling, and then they called it here the rebundling, the ability of services to become sort of more independent, and then for certain providers to bundle them together. And it talks specifically about sort of service, certain parts of the life cycle saying. So in banking here we can see licensing and custody, that happening specifically at the bank level. And then product, as you can see here, happening, and this is sort of more where you guys live, in the sort of like the Venmos, TransferWise, Revoluts, that sort of thing. We've had some big news today about AIG, I believe, who've just purchased this third largest insurance provider in the world, which makes them by a mile the largest insurer in the world. So there does seem to be some capacity or requirement for you to pay homage and pay your sort of like your deferences to the big sort of insurance providers and find your sort of place within that ecosystem. Does that seem fair?
I think so. I think Zego, we like to think ourselves as, how a couple years ago with all the neobanks and then all the challenger banks coming up, kind of seen as disrupting the banking industry during that really exciting time. I think a parallel can be drawn to Zego in our current climate. In that whilst large insurance companies have years and years of data to refine and tweak their models, their pricing, and we're just 3 years old. So where we lack in that kind of data of like decades and decades of data and thousands of users, we're challenging it from a different angle, which is we're able to innovate products, we're able to create products, deliver them way faster, way better, and deliver value that those traditional insurers are just a bit too slow to do.
But there's still a role for them, indeed.
Exactly.
So the payment happens at the end. We saw you going through that sort of flow. Do you have your own payment system built there? How did you do that initially? How did that work for you guys?
I think for us, very early on, we wanted to move fast. Our payment system is powered by Stripe.
Okay.
For most of our transactions. We do offer financing for like annual policies to be broken down into kind of like monthly installments. And in terms of that financing, we use another provider for a direct debit and financing there. But I think in terms of decision making, we believe in not reinventing the wheel. I think the cost benefit analysis for us at the time was it's worth giving that little commission to Stripe in order for us to just have the payment system ready to go out of the box.
Absolutely. I think that's a conclusion that we've come to as well. So that's good to hear. Right, so just to finish off, any big plans for 2020 from your end?
Yeah, big plans for sure.
Yeah.
Hiring, definitely one of them. as I said before, planning to double again this year, which is crazy.
Okay.
And also...
And where do people find out about that if anyone watching?
Zego.com/careers.
There we go.
Everything's on there. We're hiring across the board, which is really exciting. I think when I joined 8 months ago, the tech team was maybe like 12 to 15 people, and now we're 60 to 70.
Okay.
We've had to move offices a couple of times. So yeah, I think the growth has been exponential, which is part of the fun, I believe. In terms of big plans from a product point of view, I can only hint to it at the moment, but in the pipeline, we are working on new ways to really identify risk on an individual level. So far we've understood people's driving behaviors through our integration with work providers, right? So a traditional company wouldn't know what time you stop work, how many shifts you do during the day. That's like really valuable information to us in terms of understanding an individual and their true risk, and not just an average of you in a cohort. So where I'm really looking at and where I'm really excited for 2020 is we're looking at new ways of gathering data about your driving behavior and then funneling that back into our pricing and risk models.
Very cool. Anything that you would sort of recommend to someone who's sort of building stuff right now? Obviously, insurtech is a sort of new and happening space within FS, but what are the key sort of product roles that you have or understandings that you have for building?
Yeah, I think whether you're in insurance industry, banking, finance, or otherwise, all the key product principles still hold true. Solving a problem, understanding your users deeply. I really like kind of what you alluded to earlier, which is not reinventing the wheel. And I think it's probably what 11FS and Pulse is kind of built on, which is learning on what people have done before in the industry. So I think that there's a lot to learn just from what's already out there. I think a nice framework that I like to use when thinking about product is, what are you good at, what are you great at, and what are you best at? So there's certain things where you're going to be okay with just being good at. Your hygiene factors. This is where you can really just copy. See what's out there in the market, duplicate, or do the same. Don't reinvent the wheel. Where you really want to focus your time and energy on is where, as a product, you're going to decide to be best at. That's where you can't copy. That's where you need to, innovate.
Very cool. Thank you very much for the plug as well. That's much appreciated. That's all for today. Thanks for tuning in. Stop by next week where we'll have a few more insights and journeys for you. If you want to see a little bit more about 11FS Pulse, head over to pulse.11fs.com where you can request a demo to hear all about those different patterns we were explaining before. If you've got any questions about the product or want to suggest a journey, be that someone we should be speaking on this show or something to have a look at in Pulse, hit us at pulse@11fs.com or find us on Twitter @11fspulse. Natalie, if anyone wants to find out anything more about you or what's going on with Zego, where should they go?
Zego.com.
Zego.com/careers, of course. Great, and we'll see you next week.